Hey, Peter, how you doing?
Hey, I got you.
Cool. Yeah, thanks so much for joining. I've heard a lot of great things about the company. I actually haven't gotten a chance to really dig in too much. So could you just give me a brief intro on you, your backstory, and kind of what the company does today?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely happy to give you an intro and then tell you more about the company.
Great.
So myself, I'm the CTO of Rune. I lead the product engineering team here.
Cool.
And before Rune, I was at Anduril for 4 years as a
Hmm.
software engineer. Had some incredible opportunities there with some amazing teams.
Hmm.
And before that, I was at Facebook for 3 years, Facebook data research.
You're the
And
meme. You're the meme of like you were building ads and then Palmer said, "Hey, come do something meaningful with your life,"
exactly,
and you
I
went and
got
did it.
lured over by Balmer.
I love it. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
amazing. It's real.
And actually dropped out of college to join Facebook when I was 19.
Cool.
Interned in London at the time, and I'm originally from Austria, so I like to consider
Oh,
myself
interesting.
the most patriotic Austrian American since Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Arnold Schwarzenegger. I was going to say.
Exactly. But yeah, I had the opportunity to come here when I was 19, and participate in the American dream, and I'm grateful for that ever since.
That's fantastic.
And,
What? Yeah. What about Rune? Can you tell me?
Yeah, so about Rune, so in short, we're a military logistics technology company,
Okay.
and really the realization was that over the past few years, as defense technology companies have innovated on drone swarms and hypersonic missiles and autonomous submarines,
Hmm.
what they haven't had the focus to think about is well, if that drone breaks down in the fight,
Hmm.
where do its spare parts come from, right? Or if you
Hmm.
shoot one hypersonic missile, where do the next 30 come from? Or if you have a
Yep.
collaborative combat aircraft, where does the fuel to charge the battery to get it off the ground come from? Right? Those logistical considerations. And as I looked more into logistics, I realized that it was sort of the forgotten part of the military, especially
Totally.
at the tactical level. And I realized there was an opportunity to bring the great innovation that other companies have brought to intelligence and command and control and fires, but now bring it over to logistics
Yeah.
because I also knew that the great quotes of amateurs talk tactics and professionals talk logistics, and I
Hmm.
knew how much logistics mattered to Patton's Third Army, and so it was just such a stark contrast between logistics really matters, but then when you look at logisticians in the field, they're using whiteboards and Excel spreadsheets and scraps of paper, and there was a gap, and that's where we founded Rune to fill that.
Yeah. I don't know if you ever played like Hearts of Iron 4, but it's very funny that, Call of Duty is wildly popular, but Hearts of Iron 4 is this like intense military simulator where you can spend 12 hours just optimizing like the flow of oil to the front line. It's very logistics based, and people
Yeah.
say it's like never play the game because it's too addictive and you'll just be playing it all the time. But you're playing it in the real life. Can you talk to me more about what contested logistics mean? I've heard that term thrown around, but I don't really understand it. Is that relevant to your business?
It's an interesting term because when I started out with Rune, I also really tried to dig into what does contested logistics mean because that it's a
Hmm.
buzzword, it's out there.
Yeah.
The more and more I spoke with logisticians, they actually laughed when they heard that term because
Hmm.
all the logistics in the military they've ever done is contested, right? The
Sure.
military operates in contested spaces,
Yeah.
so the term contested logistics is really not it's actually not necessary. It's just logistics. So what we're building is not software for contested logistics. We're building software for logistics.
Got it. Can you take me through some of the history of logistics? Obviously, it was like pen and paper, and I don't know, even before that, probably like carrier pigeon. But then, of course, we've heard that like Microsoft has actually been a great partner to the DoD, and they've vended in everything from Microsoft Outlook to Excel, and those tools, although they seem silly, they're probably very helpful in terms of just understanding like how many bullets do we have in the in the armory, or how many rations do we have. But has there been what has the progression of technology and the adoption of technology look like over the last 20 years, like post global war on terror?
Yeah, I mean, logistics always has mattered, right? There's actually a great quote all the way back from Alexander the Great, where he called his logisticians a humorless lot because they were the first to be slaughtered if anything went wrong, right? So yeah, it's always
Humorless
mattered, and
lot.
always been important. When it comes to technology, one thing that's interesting about the global war on terror is that logistics wasn't actually really the focus there because,
Hmm.
we really had air superiority. So every shipment from, Germany or the US that had to get to the Middle East made it there in one piece, right? It
Sure,
really
sure.
wasn't the primary focus.
Hmm.
And it's really now more so as we're looking towards Ukraine
Hmm.
and future conflicts with near-peer adversaries, logistics is starting to matter again the way it did in past large-scale conflicts,
Hmm.
right? And seeing Russia, for example, really almost fail at taking Kiev in large part because of logistics, where that kind
Yeah.
of what people up to that problem again. Now, in terms of the technology, there's been less focus on it, and of course, Excel and PowerPoint are great general purpose tools, but what logistics is a really focused specialty with lots of doctrine and tactics and procedures, and so you can solve any problem with PowerPoint,
Yep.
but that doesn't mean you should. And so, what the software we're building is really focused on what does a logistician need when they're in the field and solving their problems.
Yeah. How do you think about the trade-off between flexibility of the design of your system versus creating something that's more deterministic, more enforcing rules on the user? You obviously, like, the worst thing when you're building software is like, yeah, we did the demo, we did the install, and then a week later they fell back to Excel, right? I'm sure you want to avoid that.
Yeah, working with our customers, it's often a back and forth between understanding their current workflows and supporting them, but then
Mm-hmm.
also showing them the art of the possible with what new technology can bring to the into the fore, right? What you can do in Excel, isn't what you can would do with AI, for example. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's actually showing them what's possible as well as supporting their current workflows, at the same time. And when it comes to generalizing the software, that's where we work with a lot of different service branches now. With the Army, with the Marine Corps, we're looking very closely at the Air Force and their branches. And so looking at how logistics is done in different parts of the military helps us build really general purpose software that could even scale beyond just the military one day, right? And disaster and rescue, oil and gas also have similar logistical needs.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll also comment, you mentioned earlier, Microsoft. There's also something that is a unique realization for us, is that the military doesn't always have perfect infrastructure available when it comes to its internet bandwidth and whatnot. And so we've also really focused on building the software to run on a laptop in the jungle, in the Philippines, in the trenches. And the way you would write your software in that kind of environment is very different than in a stable data center with infinite bandwidth and infinite resources. And so, supporting that tactical, trench warfare kind of environment is also
Sure.
what's unique about what we're doing.
So you're not
When you
melting
look at,
GPUs every time you fire up a query in Rune.
yeah, it's to me the interesting thing is, if you look back at the start of the Iraq War, the iPhone didn't release for years after that, right?
Yeah.
So I'm interested to think about how you think about mobile, and now there's just like, in theory, like an order of magnitude more devices out in the field that theoretically could be used for, to make what the sort of logistics operations more efficient. So is mobile, like, sort of widespread with these systems to date, or is it again like the sort of laptop scenario in the jungle, and just, yeah, I'm curious how you think about mobile broadly.
Yeah, mobile is popping up a lot, especially at the lowest levels where you really have, soldiers or Marines with their phones typing in logistical reports. That's happening right now, and we're working on projects to integrate with that. But what's I think even more interesting is how do you get away from humans even doing the counting right now? So
Mm-hmm.
to be very honest, the way the military right now knows how much fuel is in a certain place is that you have a private dipstick in and see how far up it goes, right? And so, that's how it's done right now. And, phones get you to, reporting that perhaps more quickly.
Mm-hmm.
But what we also want to get to is how do you not have a human in the loop in there at all with, sensors to just measure that, whether it's ammunition in a base or fuel, ideally that's all automated.
How do you?
How much?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
How much? You talked about Ukraine and learning, maybe what not to do from the Russians. How much do you think that the U.S. has to learn in Ukraine around logistics, or is Ukraine doing anything really well? Are we being sort of efficient there
Yeah,
from
we
a
heard from
logistics
Nathan that they're
standpoint?
making 1 million drones a year already, so it seems like there's some industrial capacity there.
Yeah.
And then I've also heard there's reports that like Russia was like ripping like semiconductor chips out of like washing machines and like old Ford F-150s because they were so out of like supplies. And I never know what to believe with these stories, but I'd love to hear your take.
Yeah, no, yeah, I certainly think that the United States, would have fared better in Ukraine, right? The way we fight is different. But,
Mm-hmm.
what's not too different is how we track logistics at the tactical level right now.
Mm-hmm.
The Ukrainians are using, papers and whiteboards, and that's why there largely isn't data at the tactical level on what they're actually consuming.
Mm-hmm.
And the United States military isn't too different from that right now. So, even when it comes to tactical logistics, the U.S. military has a lot you can modernize on that front, and that's what we're interested in doing right now.
Mm-hmm.
And so, that's what our focus has been.
Do you find who do you connect with most on the customer side? Like, are there people within the DoD that are just like clearly logistics nerds, and you guys just like have a 30-minute call and end up going 2 hours, and it's just like you finally are like, yes, like you
A
get
logistician.
it, because I feel like if you're anybody that's a true sort of student of history. Could get to the point where they're like, yeah, I care less about like the 6th generation fighter and more just like the basics of like how we get one thing from point A to point B.
Yeah, honestly, from the get-go, the one thing we've never had to convince somebody of is that what we're tackling is a problem.
Mm,
Everybody understood that logistics matters. Everybody understands that, the technology that logisticians have in the United States military is not where it's supposed to be. And there's obviously the logistician branch of the military, and when we work with them, and they've been, our closest design partners so far, they understand these problems because they live them every day. But
mhm.
even other warfighting functions and other military members understand the problem as well. They sometimes need to be they need to understand why logistics needs to matter to them. When you're talking to an artillery officer, for example, they do sometimes have to be led to understand how can AI for logisticians allow them to be more lethal, right? Because they're going to have munitions when they need them, before they need them, in the right place. So that's sometimes something that we show the art of the possible. But in general, everybody understands this really matters.
How are you thinking about the go-to-market and like the revenue side of the business? Is this the standard, like get some SBIR money, then make it through the Valley of Death, land at program of record, or is there just like a very different model because you're selling software in logistics?
The good thing is that, over the past few years, the military has woken up to logistics really mattering a
Mm-hmm.
lot. So, there's a lot of buzz around it now. And, in terms of what that allows us to do is, one, we can both go to operational units in the field who actually need the software, right? They'll most often be our design partners and help us develop. That's not going to be the big dollars, but it's really important for us to build the best product. And then we're also going to the innovation labs, across the services. There's organizations that, help field technology from the innovation stage. And then there's also the program offices themselves. And across the services, there's very large projects or programs underway that include sustainment now. They maybe wouldn't have 2 years ago, but they do now. And so
Mm-hmm.
it's really across the board from the largest modernization projects in the Army to the innovation labs to the operational units. We're going to all of them and having success with all of them as well.
What kind of skill sets are you hiring for right now? It feels like AI would be really important, but maybe not today. What's like the kind of the type of engineer that fits in really well at Rune today?
Honestly, we've been scaling rapidly. We're 12 people now, and I've had an engineer on board every single week for the past 4 weeks.
Nice.
So that's been really exciting growth for us. We're actually now looking for more product-minded individuals or
Mm-hmm.
product managers that have lived the dream and perhaps were veterans themselves, but now want to build technology and understand that as well. So we're looking to scale our product team right now. And as we grow further, engineering will always be our greatest asset. So engineers that have really cared about the mission before, right? We both care deeply about the mission of what we're building for, as well as having the right engineering skill sets. So engineers that identify with wanting to, like I did, not build ads anymore, but
Mm-hmm.
build military technology. That we're always gonna be looking for those.
Jordy, got anything?
That's it.
I
This was
had
very
one more
cool.
question about kind of just on the data integration side. Is it important for you to build integrations into different data lakes, data warehousing? Is it important to just do really great like PDF ingesting? How are you thinking about actually getting, I mean, I'm sure as you grow and scale, like there will be times when you run into like, okay, there actually is a lot of data here. Let's bring it in and onboard it. Is Palantir a piece of all this? Like, how do you see Rune playing into like the broader ecosystem of like military data broadly?
Yeah, so it's important about logistics that it does really require very holistic decision making, and then you can't just know what you have on hand, but also what transportation you have to get it from A to B,
Mm,
along which routes, with what
mm,
crews to actually move that equipment. If you don't have any of those pieces, you're not making a holistic decision, and it might actually just break down when it comes to the real world. So we're very interested in integrations. We have a super open architecture that lets us integrate with programs of record and other
mm-hmm,
systems. We're talking to lots of other companies that want to integrate with us.
mm-hmm.
And then we're also allowing, manual inputs as well. Like you said, whether it is, like PDFs or Excels or your manual inputs too.
Yeah,
It's kind of like a mix of other integrations, manual input,
yeah.
and you're combining all of that to give that, real world recommendation that connects all those pieces that I just mentioned.
Yeah, that's great. Well, good luck to you. Thank you so much for stopping by. This is a wonderful conversation. We'll have you back when there's more news.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks so
Great
much.
to meet
Appreciate
Peter.
it.
Yeah, have a
Bye bye.
great day. Very cool.